What's going on, world? Welcome to another edition of the Black Mental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Reg. Joined today with me is a very, very special guest. Most of my audience probably already know his face and know his voice because he has his own podcast. He's actually behind one of the many inspirations behind the start of this podcast. Wow. I used to listen to his podcast. And I like their perspectives, him and Shay Love, right?
Yep.
I like the perspectives. And I grew to know his story. Mind you, we went to school together, but I didn't know a lot of the stuff. And I was proud of him opening up and sharing some of his stuff that he never shared before. So I thought I had him on here today. He got Just Rome. There you go. Do you want your full government or just want Just Rome?
We're going to go with Just Rome.
All right.
We're going to go with Just Rome for now. Everybody already probably knows, but to the new people,
right.
I'm Just Rome. I'm Just Rome12 on Twitter and also on Instagram. You can follow me. And our podcast is called The Soapbox that Reggie was referring to. We're on a hiatus right now until we pick back up when Shay Love moved to Philadelphia.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm putting it out there. I'm not going to say when because she's going to cuss me off if I try to say when because you know how timing works.
Right.
But she'll be moving to Philadelphia. We'll be picking up and doing some amazing things when she gets back into the city.
That is what's up. That's what's up. So we're at your workplace. I don't know if you want to disclose, but we're at a university.
We can disclose that.
Okay. We're at a university, Temple University to be exact.
Yes.
And I know you transitioned with the Soapbox. You went down south.
Right.
Like that was one of the things that you started when you went down south. What made you make the transition down there? How did you get that started?
So when I was in grad school, it was important for me to rebrand myself, if that makes sense, or I wanted to try something different. So part of my graduate school experience was in counseling, and with that experience, we had to do I think a short-term and long-term plan. And my short-term plan, I wanted to move somewhere different than what I was used to. And I also wanted to work at an institution that I was unfamiliar with, which was a community college. So I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and in July. And that experience for me was life-changing for mental health reasons, number one, but just also for my own development as a man.
So when we was talking off air, you was the speaker went out, so I'm just going to talk. So we're going to go with this.
Okay.
When we was talking off air, we were talking about the reasoning why you left and went to what you said? You said the place?
Yeah, Charlotte.
You went to Charlotte.
Yeah.
I try to be careful with this information.
That's right.
So the reason why you went down there in the first place about your viewpoint on Philadelphia, what was it that was impacting you and your viewpoint on the road that made you want to say yo, I got to get out of here?
I'm glad you asked that. So for me at the time, I think we all grow up with limited perspectives. And I say limited because it's always based around your environment and your experiences. And for me, living in Philadelphia, I always had this viewpoint that it was a city that wasn't benefiting me any longer. Now, part of that reason is because I was probably doing the same stuff. I was hanging out with friends, going to certain places, doing things that were very familiar. So I wasn't really expanding my horizons in Philadelphia. Or myself. I just felt like it was just I want to try something different, let me go. What I realized once I went away and kept visiting, that Philadelphia had a lot of things to offer that I did not take advantage of. One of the biggest things was network. That I had a really big network here in Philadelphia that I think I would have been a lot further along in my career. On a professional side, I probably would have been a lot further in my entrepreneurship as well, because I had a lot of connections here that I did not utilize or didn't even realize I had them until I went away. And then, moving to a new city, you have to really rebrand yourself, especially if you're trying to make a name for yourself. So it was very difficult to make new connections and to prove yourself when people already had a track record of who you were previously.
Right. Now, you never realize how much your environment play a role into your perspective until you get out of it.
Exactly.
And it's one of those quotes where I think they say you can't see the picture while you're in the frame.
Right. So, I like that. I never heard that before.
So when you get out of it, you're able to see where you were messing up at and what's going on, because sometimes I feel like we're on that hamster wheel. Yeah. And you're trying to what am I doing wrong to get out of it? So I know when I was listening to the podcast, the Soapbox, you were talking about some of the struggles you were having transitioning Philly to down there because you were used to a certain lifestyle and you were like, oh, this is different.
Right. So lifestyle culturally was very different. You know, I grew up in North Philadelphia, and there's going to be a lot of laughter because people say I'm from everywhere in Philly, but I'm not. I'm from North Philadelphia. I lived in Logan and I lived in Albany. That's it. But with that being said, there was a lot of culture and richness in North Philadelphia that I grew up in. You know, so going to a Doomsday Festival, you know, block parties, cookouts, all those things is what I was familiar with. And it's not to say that Charlotte didn't have that. The area where I lived just wasn't like that, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? I didn't live in a hood in Charlotte.
Right.
So, you know, when I did experience other areas of culture, it tended to be in the hood. And that was probably like towards me about to leave Charlotte. I was like, damn, well, now I know the good Chinese store at. Shout out, you know, to that good Chinese store. I don't want to put the plug out because I want everybody going there. But in Charlotte, like, I found out all the cultural spots that made me feel comfortable.
Okay.
And for me, once I figured out, like, okay, cool, I don't have to be at a club every weekend, or I don't have to go out like I can do something chill. I can go to somebody's house and have a kickback. Like, I had to figure those things out, and meeting genuine people was the hard part. You know, there was a group of people that I met that I was really close with in Charlotte, but it was a different connection that I was used to in Philly. You know, so that was the hard part, was me and being blunt, being honest. Most people in the South are a little bit reserved in some capacities. Not everybody's reserved, but some people are. So I had to, you know, tailor my personality a little bit sometimes, and that can be difficult.
No, I went through a similar transition actually when I first came to Shippensburg.
Oh, wow.
Like we went to college together. I don't know if I said that already, but I was trying to figure out what the new version or the different version of myself was going to be.
Right.
And that's when the roster reg and all of that stuff came through. Mind you, after I left, I had to do it again. So you are always trying to like self-identify, but it plays tricks on you because then it's like, well, do I know who I am? Like,
That's real.
Do I know who I am?
That's real.
So you went down there and would you say that was your growth spurt, basically?
It was.
Okay.
It was. I became a lot more comfortable in so many different ways in my sexuality, and people who know me know that I'm gay. If you don't know me, I'm gay. Like, it was more of the owning of it. I think that there was always an assumption that was there. There was always a past because I was just wrong. I was cool. You know, I've always gotten that perspective where I didn't have to wear my sexuality. You know, I kind of just always blended in. Most of my friends are straight, so I just never had to deal with that. But I think I had to deal with it in Charlotte because it was a matter of, okay, who am I? Like, who am I? Or who am I trying to be? Right. You know what I mean? And I think with Shay Love and the podcast and just the people around me, they challenged me. You know, my aunt and uncle were really, really big on, you know, getting me to accept what it was and calling a spade a spade. And it wasn't about focusing on the sexuality of me being gay. It was about the lifestyle that I was living in terms of how I'm making connections with people, how am I maintaining relationships with people. You know, there was a lot of transitioning that was happening mentally for me because I was so comfortable in Philly where nobody really questioned me. Like, what you saw is what you got with Just Wrong. Like, you know, everybody saw me being the guy that was known, or fashion show, whatever. It was all those identities, or I guess they are identities. There were different identities that people knew me as. That's what I was to them. But I was much more than that. I just didn't know how to tap into it without me being uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
No, I got you. One of the things that made me like want to really have this conversation was when I talked to you and we was discussing about, all right, what were we going to talk about on the podcast? What were we going to do? And you was like, well, I'm coming from your perspective of why that I didn't really mess with you in college because of that reason. Right. And backstory, I don't know if you remember this. You were my first mentor when they did the overnight stuff.
Oh yeah, I remember that with Sharif and
yeah, I came in and I was we spent the night in your room. You had to, I don't know where you were staying at, but it was me and and we spent the night. But that's before they canceled it. Y'all kids got wild, so they canceled it up there. But
wow, you bringing it back? Okay,
you were my first mentor. I don't even know what they called that. The transition or whatever that was. So to fast forward to today, it was shocking. Not even shocking. It was maybe I can't describe the feeling, but to understand like how your impression on somebody can make them feel a certain. I didn't even know I did that.
Yeah.
Like it was like, yo, y'all. I didn't think y'all messed with me because of my sexuality, and I'm like, I didn't even pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But it was because what I talked about earlier about the whole roster reg and all of that stuff. It's like, oh, rosters don't mess with gay people. So even if it's the insinuation of that you may be that, it's like, all right, I'm gonna stay away just because. But as I grew, it was like, all right. You want to understand everybody. So are you going to target this type of people because you don't, it doesn't match. So that's what made me transition away from roster reg and all of that. Because if I self-identify with that meaning, I would have to self-identify with everything that came with that.
Exactly.
And it's like
cherry picking.
right. So it's like now it's like, all right, what's your new version? And let me understand that. But the reason why I brought that up is because I wanted to understand how can someone what's the word I'm looking for? What was I doing to give you that inclination?
You know, I think it could have been a personal thing. I think that, like I was saying before, I've always been the cool boy. I never really had any beefs in college with people. I mean, I might have had some arguments here and there, but I never really experienced anybody disliking me openly. Like, you know what I mean? I never had that experience. So people either gravitated to me, wanted to be around me. I was used to that. And I think that because of how I am in my personality, I like attention. Like that's just, I know I've grown to realize and accept what it is. I like attention. So, my friends would entertain me. I would entertain them, and there always just felt like between you and Jabril was like this coldness.
Right.
And I never feel like I actually got to y'all. Like I never really was able to touch y'all in a way to show you who I was, or you know what I mean. I felt like Rich was the midway because we were doing a modeling troupe and he had an interest in modeling.
Right.
So I got a chance to know Rich and kind of mentor Rich in a different way. But I just feel like because you and Rich and Jabril and all y'all were friends, it was a delineation of separate. Like it was Reg and Jabril and Rich, and then it was Rich, Rome, and Shock, whatever.
Right.
So we never really crossed like that.
Right.
And I'm like, why didn't when we was always around each other? It just didn't make sense to me because we literally was always around each other. We just didn't chill with each other.
Right.
So the only thing that I could think of that was a common denominator was just that you didn't like because of my sexuality. I knew that Jabril and Shock had their own thing at one point in time.
And that's what I was about to say. That's where I think it really came from. Y'all just was close, and it was like I never had no problem with Shock.
Right.
My man's there, so I'm like...
That's vice versa. Shock is my man, so he don't fuck with y'all, I don't fuck with y'all.
Right.
So I get it. So, and again, I didn't understand why, it just was what it was. So, and again, being young men and being territorial and trying to puff each other, just trying to show loyalty in certain ways that's really not healthy. Right. But just to do 100%. It in a way, like to show that we're being loyal to each other, that's how we divided ourselves from one another versus having a conversation to understand. And we just never had that. So in my mind, I felt that you just didn't fuck with me because I was gay. That's what I knew for a fact in my mind. Right. Because I'm like, what other reason could he not fuck with me? Right. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what would be the other reason? Right. So I'm like, I'm not a bad guy. I don't, I may joke around. I'm shady with comments and all that, but that's part of my personality. I'm not really a bad person. Right, you know what I mean? So I'm like, there should be no reason. And if that's the only reason, then cool, I respect it. It is what it is. It is what it is. And I was going to say his loss, but I couldn't even say it's your loss because you didn't even know.
No, right.
What I mean? But it's just a matter of like, I had to learn that there's some people who's not going to fuck with me for that. And I think that was always hard for me to really understand because I've always felt that I was normal. You know what I mean? I think that I've spoken to this about with my friends before about if I was more feminine, if I, cross-dress, like how would you receive me then? Right. Because there were guys on our campus who didn't have that same reputation in terms of being cool, that all the guys would hang around and it's not be a problem. Right. But because of how I carry myself, how I dress, how I present myself, it's easy for me to blend in. You know what I mean? So I've always wondered that, but it does make it difficult when somebody doesn't like you and you're looking at yourself like we the same. Like the only thing, I sleep with this, you sleep with that. Like other than that, what does it matter? You know what I mean? But that can be a lot for people when you grow up in a certain way and you don't really have exposure to the understanding of how that becomes that, if that makes sense.
It's crazy because I was talking to another male friend about that same exact topic, and he made me realize that it's never about you not liking, like personally, I'm not liking Jerome. It's you trying to prove to the other guys around you that real. You're not dead.
Exactly.
You can never have a problem. It's like, oh wait, they're gonna make fun of me because I'm his friend, or they're gonna make, and that's like once you grow, like I'm cool with who I am and my personality, like to know that, yo, I don't care if y'all say that I can still be cool, but I'm learning, looking back, it was like, oh, it's the thought that if you were associated with that person that you may be entitled. It's just like if a woman is promiscuous and they consider her a hoe, it's like, well, hoes flock together, so you kind of carry that connotation with it. And it was like, wow, that's like I'm imagining how all these young men probably feel out there, and that's why it's so much of a divide between it, because they already feel like, yo, I don't want to be teased or made fun of because of that point.
Because of that.
And mind you, I just hit that revelation at 27.
It's a real thing. I mean, I know that, you know, Shock and Walt and Aaron, there's so many people that I was specifically close with in college. And of course you would hear, oh, they like, nah, we just cool.
We just friends.
But again, like you said, because of that perspective, and because I'm getting you straight, what's our commonality?
Right.
You know, but people don't see it that way. So there, you know, I know that some of my friends still probably get the jokes behind the back about you still cool, you friends with the faggot boy, whatever, and derogatory term, but you know, that's just how people talk in the hood.
Right.
So I get that, and for me, I had to just say fuck it, you know what I mean? And even I would tell them, like, you know, that's your choice to be my friend, so that's what comes with the territory. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. And the fact that those same men still stand and stood by my side through all that says a lot about them to me. So that's why my loyalty, it is the way it is with them, because I know what is. I don't know what it's like. I've been on the opposite side of that, but I know what that can feel like when you really have a genuine friendship with somebody and someone's trying to suggest something else that kind of disrespects your identity or your manhood.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
So it can be a lot, but I think to your point, the division is horrible. I mean, because there's so many commonalities in our lives that we get so stuck on that one difference that breaks us apart and creates divisions. You know, so a lot of men, you know, a lot of the conversations they have are with women sometimes that are gay. You know what I mean? A lot of black men that I know are gay have a lot of female friends. Along with I have probably about a good 5 that I can say that are really good friends that I talk to. But, you know, there's some things I can talk to them about that I can't talk to my homeboys about. There's something I can talk to my homeboys about I can't talk to them about.
Right.
So, you know, so there's always going to be those two lanes with that Venus versus Mars thing. But I think that as men, we're still men, you know, and I think that you do need to have, you know, a brotherhood, a friendship, or whatever you want to call it, around you to help you process information and process stuff that you're going through, because we have similar experiences, gay or not. I mean, that's just what it is.
That's true. And I was me being on this journey of trying to understand, because I feel like as men, that's all we do as when we start growing is we try to understand. And it was one thing, it was like I was trying to not touch it, but it's like, you know what, I'm just going to start reaching out and just starting to just, like you said, we're all brothers at one day, and I can't be all right, men, we stick together, and then, like, I got to be with these my brothers too.
That's what it is.
These my brothers too. Yeah. So maybe because I don't understand it, let them explain it to me so I can come to a understanding. Right. Like I had on last episode with I was about to call her Shank, but Shank, and I was talking to her about, like, I still don't know to this day right now in this moment, if my son came to me and told me he was gay, what I would do. Like, I still don't know what is that conversation look like, how to have it, what do I do, how do I progress, because even though he has his feelings, I have my feelings as well.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to just throw my son, and now I got 2 sons, I'm not going to throw my son away because of that, but I still don't know how to process it. God, I'm talking too much. I still don't know how to process it as a man.
Right.
So my question to you, what would you want, I don't know if you can come back to it, but what would you want your father or to do for you when you wanted to have that conversation with him?
Okay, that's a good question. And for me, I told my dad more than once And I think because some of what you said, he has his own feelings, he has his own perspectives, he has his own desires, but I think you have to put that aside because it's not about you in that moment. It's not about you, at that time, because they're going to go through a whole lot of different experiences, mental experiences that can impact how they look at the world, how they look at themselves, what actions, how they go about certain stuff in their life. Because one thing that my uncle said to me recently before I moved to Charlotte, he said, had the family, acknowledged that we acknowledged and talked about that you being gay and we was fine with it, that we loved you regardless, you could have lived your life completely different because you didn't have to worry about keep trying to proving yourself to somebody. You didn't have to worry about proving, or trying to get validation from people around you and other men around you, and that's part of the fraternity piece, and I can talk a little bit about that too, but your father, that's your first line of comfort, protection, all of that, So my dad never really disowned me or never really said, I don't like, he wasn't that type of guy. But knowing him is like he respected for what it is for me. He don't agree. He may or may not agree with it, but it is what it is, and we just coexist in that space. I think it's difficult in my ability to develop relationships with other men in ways of dating, because I can't bring nobody home. Like it's a lot of it's still a lot of working parts with that, because it's still how he feels about it. And for most of my experiences, I was in Charlotte for 4 years. My uncle was very opposite that. My uncle would sit down and ask questions of the guys that I was dating, like, why are you still my nephew? Like, straight like that, you know what I mean? Right. Because at the end of the day, this is my nephew, So I had a very different experience being in Charlotte, where the openness of a man that I respect, that's still the head of the house at that point, was still checking in on me, making sure I was good, and it wasn't about sexuality. It just was about, that's just what it is.
It's a love.
It was a love. It was bottom line. It was love, and my dad has that love for me, but he doesn't know how to embrace that aspect. I think if I was, straight fucking bitches playing sports, it would be a different situation. I think that he loves me for who I am, for sure. Like my dad wouldn't trade me for the world, and I know that for a fact. And he's made every chance and effort to ensure that I know that he loved that he knows that I love him, and vice versa. Right. But I think for me it would have just been a constant of acceptance, and I know that from his experiences it's difficult for him to accept that in a moment when you do tell him. You know what I mean? So it's going to be it has been a gradual experience, in our relationship, but we don't talk about it, and I think that makes it difficult sometimes, especially when I'm going through things. I have to call on my aunt or my uncle or my friends to talk about some of the issues. I really can't talk to my mom and my dad about it because they don't really acknowledge it in that way. Not that they don't respect it, they just don't acknowledge it. Right. So it's like, to them it's out of sight, out of mind. Right. You know what I mean? Right. So that can make it difficult when you're looking, at this point, I'm almost 30 years old. So there's only so much dating and fucking I'm going to be doing. After a while, there's going to be some sort of person that's going to be consistent in my life. Right. I want a family too eventually. I don't know how it's going to look, because that's tricky. Right. But it gets tricky. One of these beautiful ladies that I'm friends with going to have my child. Right. But yeah, it's a lot, and I have to even in that I have to think about like how what is a family like for me? How does that look? How is my child going to be raised? Like there's so many layers to that. So my uncle said, if we would have just, said we okay, you probably lived your life differently. And I believe that 100%, because I think that I went off to college with this chip, and college allowed me to be who I wanted to be. And I think me not feeling rejection, it was all love there. Like in between Ms. Dobb, I mean, there was so many different levels of love and acceptance that I got being at school, that it made me feel good to be who I was. You know what I mean? So when I would come home, I would have to be somebody else. You know what I mean? And now I'm being asked about where the bitch is at, or I saw you with that girl in the picture. Who that girl? Where that girl at? You know what I mean? So it was like all these different things. I had two different identities that I had to constantly keep up with. And when I got to Charlotte, I just took off everything. I literally just derobed myself. And was like, okay, this is who you are, you know what I mean, and walk in that. And it was tough sometimes, but I had to.
Got you. So you were talking about, you touched on the conversation like with your dad. Like, how is you guys' relationship now? Or, matter of fact, I'll even change it. You said that before you told him you were even coming on this podcast, he already had his gripes about what you were going to say or what was going on and what was going to be said. So I guess you could dive in a little bit more about that.
Right. So it wasn't really gripes. I think that on my end, I think I was just concerned about what I was saying, how it came out. Because I think we're definitely in a great space. Okay. I think me being older has contributed to that. You know, it's tough because as a man, you're your own man. So it's like me and him. Like when I was younger, I would argue but back down, but now I'm arguing like, nigga, what's up? You know what I mean? So it's, but you know, it's tough. Right. But for me, I think that I have a better understanding and appreciation for him. That I can see his perspectives a lot more clear now than I was before. I think that I was focused on me as a child. But now having some lived experiences and having some experiences where I've known that I fucked up on something, or I've known that I've done something that could have been done differently or better. That for him to admit certain things like that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense now. Because you know, as a child, you don't have a lot of answers to certain things that are going on around you. You just have to deal with it. And part of me dealing with it was me being distant. So I would punish my dad, quote unquote, when I was younger, like in my teens, by not calling him on the phone, you know, not going to see him on the weekends, because we had like a weekend visitation type of situation. But I would just not go, you know, and I knew that was going to hurt him. I was intentionally trying to hurt him to send a message because I was mad. You know what I mean? Versus now as an adult, what he was explaining to me, he was like, you know, there was so much toxic stuff around you that impacted your outlook on me as a father, and you weren't able to see the love that I had for you because of what was being said about me around you. So I took on that baggage a lot of times, and I did believe some of those things. And even though I felt the way I felt, I never stopped loving him. He was always my hero. He was always my dad. You know what I mean? So it never really changed the outlook. It just changed how we interacted. And when I went off to college, that was a time where I began to express my own freedoms and liberation, I guess you would say. So it became a little bit more strained because now I got education a little bit, plus my own perspective. So now I'm going to challenge you with some shit. Now I'm wrong. So now I'm saying this shit was talking about was bullshit. That's how I feel. So, but even in me saying that it's bullshit, even though I do feel it's bullshit, I know that it's because of his limited experiences. So a lot of times we are probably saying the same thing. It's just that we're missing it. And like the other day, I was talking about the universe being the same as God. He was like, that's not the same. And I'm like, Dad, it's the same. It's all energy. It's all energy. It's all the same. But because of how he looks at it and his angle, his perspective, he sees it that way. And I said, you know what? We're saying the same thing, Dad, honestly. So let's just cut it out. We're saying the same thing. He's like, no, we not. You gotta meet your maker. What you gonna say to him? I said, what the fuck you gonna say to him? What you gonna say? So, you know, I realized that through my experiences with him, the honesty on both parts has helped us move forward and heal. You know. Now
that's funny because I talk a lot on the podcast about my relationship with my dad, but I mean, last time I talked about it, we were in a rocky space, but now we're in a good space, guys. Again, I'm gonna get him up here or on here. Like you said about you now understanding his perspective as a man, like you still may feel your type of way, but you understand it. You don't have to agree with it, And like as soon as you said that, I thought of an instance where my dad, he wasn't the full-time provider. He actually moved down south to North Carolina, but he sent money one time, and my mom, I think it was like maybe $30, $40. And probably was around school time. I don't know. He was like, here goes some money. You split it with your sister. Same kid. Same father for me and my sister. And they laughed at him. And was like, this it? Like, this food. Like, why would he send that? And I went through talking to him now as a man. He was like, man, anything I did, your mom, it was never good enough for them. And they made me feel inadequate as a man. Like, well, I might as well not do nothing if everything I do looks like it's never enough. So I might as well do nothing. And one thing I always have now as a man and being a father, I always have a problem with women putting men that try as in the same box as men that don't do nothing.
Okay.
And they'll say you ain't shit, and it's like, dude, but I'm trying. At least you can call me. At least you got some type of communication line to me and all of that stuff.
Okay.
And just hearing that, it was like you said, when you become a man, you go through your experience, and then you talk to another man. It's like, this is just a flawed human. This all it is a flawed human. He tried his best, and he did his. I was what is it called? A casualty. Like I wasn't purposely supposed to get hurt, but I got hurt through him trying to figure things out and figuring life out as a man.
Exactly. And that's the best way to kind of look at it, because you know, you have to understand that nobody really knows how to be a parent.
That's it. There's no rule book to it.
You're a parent right now. So, you know what I mean? Even when somebody used to say that, I'm like, yes, you do. You should know. You shouldn't have had no kid. You know, because my dad was like, you know, I did this. I say, but you didn't put no condom. You should have put a condom on. But again, shit happens. Things happen. And for him, my dad, he had to step in. He was a young father, and it was a single father with my older sister. So he was already a father before I became along. So when I came along, there was more structure because my mom and him were together. My sister was, you know, but there was a lot more family-ness that was happening. But he still had his own things he was still dealing with and coping with. My mom had some issues, you know, as she was dealing with them. So to him, like, my response when he was telling me, I was like, but y'all was young. He was like, we were old enough to know. And I was like, but y'all still was young. You know what I mean? Like, we're 29, 28, 30, you know, still talking about experiences and still growing. My dad couldn't, he had to be only, 22, 21, 22. Exactly right. You know what I mean? So it's like, you're still young. You know, you're trying to play parent in house when you're still developing as a person. So you have a child that you have to give a lot of your energy to and a lot of your attention to, and sometimes they don't get all that because you need something for yourself, or you know what I mean, that's just being real, or you don't have nothing to give. So you know, I had to really think about his experiences and also understanding how he grew up. You know, he from the projects in South Philly. So like, and he went through a lot more poverty than I did. So I can see how, you know, how it shaped his perspective. So I'm able to kind of say, you know, even though I was upset with you, I'm entitled to be upset with you. But I forgive you because I understand your experience, and I can't fault you for that.
I've come to realize that I had to stop fighting for the child, and start valuing the relationship. Like I value the relationship. As long as he's open to it, you gotta you're not a child anymore. Like it's as bad as you can be from like not getting your bike or not him missing a birthday party. It's like. What can he do? Take you to Chuck E. Cheese tomorrow? Nope. Like that's not gonna bring back that. So now you have to fight to make the relationship that you guys have now and grow from here, like, and see what y'all gonna do now. And like you said, mind you, through this journey and figuring out and talking to men, and we talked about it off air. A lot of men don't want to not be shit. It's not like they purposely go out there to try to be ain't shit, but their lifestyle and like you said, the things that they go through and the things that it shapes them of who they are, and you're just caught in the misfire of who they are. All right, so you went to you was in the university and you talked earlier about it, being in a fraternity. What was your perspective on it, and like what did you how can I say go through and that shaped your viewpoint on fraternity?
So I think for me, I grew up in North Philly, like as I said before, and the Kappa headquarters is literally down the street from where I grew up. And I remember being young, and it was these men that were just dressed really well, that was handing out lunches. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it was niggas handing out lunches. So I didn't really connect the dots of what a fraternity was until I got older when I was in high school. So I played tennis, and my tennis coach was a Delta. And my principal was a Delta. So I remember seeing like these funny looking letters and shit all over the fucking place. Like, what the fuck is this shit? And she explained what it was, and I was like, oh, Greek Delta. Like, it's okay. And then when I was, I went to a tennis tournament to see Serena and Venus play, and her brother came with us to the tournament. He had on his Kappa jacket. And I was like, Kappa, that sounds familiar. I remember that. And I connected the dots. And this is me at 10th, 11th grade. And I'm about to go off to college. And I believe that was the same year that Stump the Yard had came out. So now it's becoming full circle. So you're seeing this pleasant stuff. You're seeing these letters. You're hearing these buzzwords of brotherhood and service and scholarship. And that became an interest of mine because I began to look at it. I'm like, oh, this is prestigious. This is history. This is, all those things. And the utmost respect to them all. But, so for me, that was, in my mind, an opportunity to become a part of that. I wasn't even looking at the idea of it being about a brotherhood at that time because I looked at it from an opportunity standpoint.
Right.
When I got to college, it became more about the brotherhood piece because I didn't have any older brothers. I didn't have any. I have younger brothers, but I've always wanted older brothers. I always wanted brothers that was around my age or whatever. And that was my opportunity to develop those relationships, and I thought that would be the best way to do that.
Right.
So most people know that I attended the Pledge Cap or whatever. So like it just, for me, the experience at the time was about my sexuality. And they made that to be
focal point.
It was a focal point, but they explained to me that my experience would be different in the fraternity. If that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So for me, I was like, why would it be different? I'm just like, y'all, I'm cool. I'm like, I don't get it. And it didn't dawn on me until about 3 weeks ago, where I realized that while it may have been a focal point or an issue for some of them, but not all of them, it was an issue for some of them, I think I had more of an internal issue with it because I didn't accept it for myself. I was still having internal issues with it, and I think that they brought those issues to the forefront and forced me to deal with them.
Got you.
So I think that I carried the burden and weight for so long that I didn't become X, Y, and Z because of my sexuality. It was because of myself and me not being comfortable with it. And I think it still was a twofold that was there. But I think largely on what I left from that experience was that I was good enough because I was gay. And I don't think that was the message that they really were sending. I think that was something that I interpreted because of my experience and because of certain what people say, you know what I mean? And that contributes to how you see yourself sometimes. I've never been called a faggot before. So like not to my face. You know what I'm saying? Like you probably got some shit to say, but not to my face. So I never heard that term until I was around certain fraternity some of the brothers in the fraternity. I'm like, who the fuck is he? Like, what? So that kind of threw me off. Like, that was a level of disrespect to me when you're calling me that, because I'm like, I look at that as a derogatory term, and to me, and within being gay, faggot is considered to be something that's very derogatory. So being called a faggot is you being really the scum on the earth in terms of like how you carry yourself, what you do. And I'm like, that's not me, So for you to associate that with that title with my identity was like, y'all don't even know me. You know what I mean? Y'all don't even know me. So I think that it really affected me for a while because that was something that I felt that I never achieved. I've always been a person who went after stuff and got it done, did it, and that was that. So that was the one thing that I never completed, and or got as an accomplishment, if you want to say that. So it kind of fucked with me because there was a sexuality piece. So I think I carried that same weight for a little while. And there was a point where I got over it, like fuck it is what it is. You know what I mean? I'm me, but I think it still played in my back of my mind when I would see people, go over and cross, and and I'm like, well, damn, that could have been me, So it did play a lot into it, but I really had to be honest and think back, like, was it really about what they were saying about how I really felt? And I think because I wasn't as comfortable with myself, I think that played into my psyche as well, on perceiving that message the way I perceived it.
Got you. Yeah. Your perspective on universities, and it was an episode you and Shay Love had on the podcast when y'all talked about PWIs versus HBCUs. And I wanted you to speak more, I guess, on this platform of the way it impacts your mental health with being on a PWI and a HBCU.
So I think for people who work at a HBCU, I think that the mental health, there's a perception that being around black people or being around people that's like yourself creates comfort. That is true in some cases, but I think because there's so much, excuse me, y'all. I'm sorry. Had to get that out. Because there's so much within group differences that makes it challenging. So I did my research in grad school on African American men and within group differences in their academic success at PWIs and HBCUs. My research revealed that there was no difference in academic success at the institution. So that tells me that, okay, it's really the institution, it's the individual. And it's the individual and how they interact with their environment and how that environment affects them. So at a HBCU, while you may see, and I did not attend one, but I've had friends that went to HBCUs, primarily in the South, where I know a lot of gay guys that went to HBCUs, and they were always like the fashion person, similar to how I was that shit, like the fashion person, the fashionist. But there was a very different reality that they faced. Not all of them, but some of them may have faced a different reality in terms of their socialization on campus. You know, many of them had to probably form their own groups or kind of be not pushed to be in certain, because ironically, I would say a lot of the gay guys and that I met that went to HBCUs are in fraternities. Wow. So that was very different. I assumed that was going to be very different, but that was very different because I'm like, some of them are alphas, and not that there's gay people in fraternities, we all know that. But to me, based off my experiences, my personal experiences, and what I went through, I assumed that they would have a difficult time or whatever. But again, I don't know the chapter, and a lot of that plays into dynamics of within group differences, as I said. Right. PWIs, in terms of the workplace, can be challenging because of the cultural normalcy of whiteness. So what that means is there's a socialization process that happens in how we speak, you know, how we do things, that's pretty much the standard. Right. And anything that deviates away from that is abnormal. So there's times where I've had meetings in this very room, and I have white counterparts who are saying some shit. I'm like, yo, that's wild that they saying that. Right. But if I said it or one of my other coworkers said it, we would be looked at kind of crazy with a side eye. Right. So I've seen that white people get away with a lot of stuff, especially white women. And I think that it makes it very interesting just to see how the power and dynamic work. The one thing I love about Temple is that there's such a passion for diversity, and it sounds corny, but it really is. So even when we were doing interviews, they were very intentional about, we want to have people who look like our students. Okay. So they were like, we already got too many white people here. Right. Like, and I was with, I'm like, yeah, it is a lot of white, it is a lot of white y'all, like it's a lot of y'all in here. Right. So, you know, even our interview process, they were really intentional about what that reflects like to the student. And even when I interviewed, I spoke about the importance of me being a black man and working at Temple and why that's important. Right. You know, so I think it depends on institution type, the culture of the institution that you're working at, but for the most part, there is a very difference in our experience because it happens at Fortune 500 companies or business companies. I mean, it happens at a lot of places, but every culture is different. That work culture is going to be different. I used to want to work at HBCU, but I don't know about that any longer because and again, we all have shit, and I heard this argument before. White schools go through shit, black schools go through shit. I get that. I just find that sometimes, depending on the culture, that it can be a lot of bullshit that happens when it's us. Sometimes that's just what it is. It can be a lot of bullshit sometimes. And I've had friends who worked at other institutions who don't get their paycheck on time. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what that's about, and I'm not about to experience that. So yeah. I mean, maybe down the line, you know, if I get older, I would love to work at HBCU. But right now, I'm just not interested working there. I would attend one, get a PhD from one. I would encourage, you know, my kids, my family, whoever. I would encourage that for sure. But just knowing the work culture and institution, how they work from a governing standpoint, I can't deal with it. That's just me.
And I got you.
We all have a choice.
Right. I got you. All right. So my final question is, and I know you probably, because you were just talking about it, which you said before I came in, like mental health and stuff like that. What is your perspective, overall opinion, and viewpoint on mental health in the black community?
It's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot. There's several things. I'm going to do 3 things to touch on. I think that we have to remove the stigma of being, or the idea of being crazy. I think we use that a lot, very loosely in black communities about somebody being crazy. because we see things that are different than how we normally respond to things. Now, again, that person that you may be calling crazy may be having some mental health issues and or disorders, but that doesn't mean that they are not human. My mom's bipolar. So I've watched a lot of times people in my own family devalue her experiences and reduce it to she crazy or she's not on her medication right now. She don't know what she's talking about. So I can't even imagine if I'm trying to express my opinions or my feelings, somebody's telling me that they're not my feelings. You know, that's a very difficult thing to experience and encounter. So living with someone who was bipolar and watching my mom go through the up and down battles of that, it is rough. And I think within the family, had the family knew how to normalize her experience, I think she would have been she would have been less likely to have certain experiences in which she would have probably went off on a deep end. And I think I say the deep ends because we all notice the signs of certain things when things are not right, but we don't know how to approach them because we're even thinking that how the person's going to react, or oftentimes we just reduce it to somebody just acting out. So I think we have to be important on, again, number one, not labeling and understanding. Number two, when it comes to sexual assault, molestation, we have to stop normalizing it. And there are a lot of people who live with trauma because they've been sexually assaulted or raped, and they had to see their brother every day. They had to see their dad every day. They got to see their uncle every day. They got to see their cousin every day. Because it's something that happens to everybody at some point, and it's like, oh, you know, that happened, you should get over it, you know, it is what it is. Nah, like, that's trauma. And for people to kind of push it aside or not deal with it makes it difficult for that individual to really progress in life, because they carry that weight of someone not being able to say, we hear you crying, we understand your pain, how can we help, versus you got to get over that at some point in life. You know, that's a very different message to hear, especially for our black women. You know what I mean? There oftentimes have been a lot of situations where they were wearing the wrong dress or the wrong skirt. They shouldn't have been doing that around no grown man. And like, so you justifying the fact that, what? So it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that the reason why we are where we are is because we are a resilient culture. And with that resiliency come with stubbornness. It comes with a lot of pain, because one thing I had to realize is that a lot of things are pathology. And what that means is that there has been historical evidence of behaviors, you know, within our families that can go back to our grandparents. But who's having those conversations intersexually with each other to say, oh, wait a minute, oh, grandma used to, oh, or my dad used to, like, oh, yeah. But we're often left to deal with things on our own. So you have people who are in their 20s and their 30s who are still processing shit when they was 5 and 6 years old. You know what I'm saying? Because no one was there to help them process it, because they were expected to get over it and to move on with their lives. So we have to stop justifying, labeling, and being more aware of checking in with each other, because, you know, one of my biggest things that I've always felt is that I've always been the strong person in my group of friends where I'm always giving advice, or I'm the person to talk to, and I used to feel like nobody's checking in on me, or nobody's really, you know, figuring or asking me, is everything okay with me? You know what I mean? Because you carry that weight of trying to be the person who everybody else can come and lean on. But who can I lean on? Who can I talk to? And while you have friends, and friends are definitely friends, I think that even when we go through things, you know, I think it was a meme, and somebody was like, you know, we're always talking about checking in on your friends and mental health, but somebody say you depression, you be like, oh, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know, like, I hope you get better. Like, you know, so we're encouraging each other to speak out about it, but we're not prepared to deal with it when it's laid on us. And I think that's the bigger issue that we have, is that we have to learn how to genuinely just be there for people. And I don't know whether everybody can do that, because it takes a lot to really, really have an empathetic heart and be sympathetic at the same time. But we have to just be more intentional about our experiences as people. in our culture.
And on that note, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Follow him; it'll be over his head. Make sure you follow him. Subscribe to his podcast. So, are you bringing it back?
Yeah, we're bringing it back.
All right.
You check out our old episodes on SoundCloud. We're also on iTunes. I'm always often looking to speak at engagements, have conversations. Hit me up. I'm down for it.
Follow him on social media. Make sure you subscribe, everything. And remember that this podcast has never been about replacing therapy. It's alternative, and it's a place where people share therapeutic stories. Thank you for listening.
Love that.